justice. We are very grateful, everyone joining us tonight, and a big thank you to Hunt and Andrews for hosting us tonight, and Jorge, who is on the YLNLC at Hunt, who helped arrange it. So thank you, Jorge. I also want to thank our event co-chairs, Emily and Lori, and subcommittee chairs, Myra, Tyler, Josette, and Chris, for organizing this year's Avenues to Justice, and as well as the DC Bar Foundation, especially Daryl and Greer. If you guys know Daryl and Greer, they're phenomenal assets and just fantastic to work with. So thank you to all of those folks. I am Allison Rochford. I'm the co-chair of the Young Lawyers Network Leadership Council of the DC Bar Foundation. Our group name is quite a mouthful, but I am immensely proud of the work the YLNLC does each year. We were formed in 2011, and we provide young lawyers, and those are lawyers under 40 or lawyers who have been practicing for less than 6 years, an opportunity to support the goals of the DC Bar Foundation, which is to further the access to justice within our community by supporting the mission of the DC Bar Foundation. Our members contribute to the work of the DC Bar Foundation by serving on various committees and through Avenues to Justice, which is our signature event each year. I encourage any young lawyer in the room or anyone who knows a young lawyer to consider applying to join our leadership council. Applications are available now, and they are due on July 31st for 2-year terms beginning in October. Thank you all for your support tonight. And before I welcome Kelly Darnell, who is the immediate past president of the DC Bar Foundation, I would like to introduce Chris Lowry, who's joining us from Charles Lowry, who is the DC Bar president. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I'm Charles Lowry. I'm the new DC Bar president. I started July 1st, my term. I think I went to DCAF, Gabby's event. That was my first event, sort of in my interim status before I officially became president. But this is, I think, my first event officially president to come see you guys. So, I did come to last year's event. I mean, I don't know much, and I need to learn more about the Young Lawyers Network and the Leadership Council. And I hope that I can keep in touch with you all throughout the year and maybe come to another event and activity. I wanted to mention that our past president, immediate past president, Alan Jakovic, helped to establish our Young Lawyers Community, and we call it ECLC, Early Career Lawyers Community. And so I think that if you all, who among you are DC Bar, are barred in DC? Do you have a DC Bar membership? So if you're a young lawyer, younger lawyer, you can join that community, and you can still join that even if you've already paid your DC Bar dues. That's open for you to participate in. But I hope that that community could really dovetail with the work that you all are doing as well. And so I have to give my regrets now that I'm doing this job and I work downtown. I gotta walk over to 16th and K Street because the DC Bar Association, that's a voluntary bar, not our bar, is having their membership meeting, and the judges are going to be there, and they're swearing in their new president. So I need to walk over to that event. But I wanted to say thank you all for allowing me to speak. And I do want to follow up. Is this event being live streamed or anything, or is this really recorded? Okay. Okay. So maybe I can then follow up, and I'd like to hear what the panel talks about and follow up. But you all can always find me at the DC Bar if you have a question or concern. I want to be available to each and every member, and all those of you that can be future members of the DC Bar as well. But thanks for having me, and I'm going to stand in the back, and then I'll have to leave out. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing our new bar president to speak. I'm Kelly Darnell. I am the immediate past president of the DC Bar Foundation. Our president, John Relman, is traveling internationally and could not be here today. So hopefully you will absolutely get a chance to meet John because he is an incredible human being. So on behalf of the foundation, I want to welcome you to Avenues of Justice. Last year it was outside and I was so worried when I walked over here that it would be outside again. I'm so happy that it's not. Thanks to our host, Hunton Andrews Kurth, for generously providing tonight's space. It is a beautiful space, and the catering and the technical assistance. And thank you to the Young Lawyers Network Leadership Council for planning another fantastic and educational event. Every year, Allison, I say to Kira, why is the name so long? I trip over it every single year. We are proud of your work as ambassadors. Last year, I'm hoping the fundraising blows it out of the water because it was incredible last year. This event would not be possible without the support of our generous corporate and individual sponsors who provide critical resources that help keep our work moving forward. You'll see their names listed up on the screen, but I want to give a special shout out to our titanium level corporate and individual sponsors. And so our corporate titanium sponsors are Lathan and Watkins and Northrop Grumman. Can we get a round of applause for them? Our individual titanium sponsors are Josette Barsano, Josette, yay. Tyler Bridigan, Mark Flyshaker, Merle Grenadier, Ellen Jakovic, Adam Polay, and Melissa Weberman. Thank you. 2 donors have agreed to match up to $5,000 during tonight's event, so please give generously. Daryl, what is our goal tonight?
The stretch goal is 70,000. They're going to talk about it in a minute.
Okay. And last year, what did they raise?
65.
Oh, okay. Perfect. We have a strict, thank you for that. I know we'll make it, and I'll make sure I give generously as well. Tonight's conversations will focus on community well-being, a theme that shapes the DC Bar Foundation's work. We understand that addressing immediate legal issues is essential and life-changing. If a family is at risk of being evicted from their home, we want them to have an attorney to represent their interest in staying housed. But this is not the whole picture. Families and individuals need more than just a house to live in. Our partner organization, the Full Frame Initiative, identifies 5 components necessary for individuals and communities to experience well-being. The first being social connectedness. This means being connected to people and communities in ways that allow us to give and receive in spaces where we experience belonging to something bigger than ourselves. The second is stability. Stability comes from having things we can count on to be the same daily and knowing that a small bump won't create a domino effect. Safety. Safety is the ability to be ourselves without significant danger or harm. Mastery. Mastery meaning we're able to influence other people and what happens to us. It means that we have a sense of purpose and the skills to navigate and negotiate our lives. Meaningful access to relevant resources like food, housing, clothing, sleep, and more without shame, danger, or great difficulty. This is the kind of well-being that the foundation and its partner organizations that you'll hear from this evening are working to build in the district. Before I turn it over to Chris, I just want to say that we focus on the DC Bar Foundation board so intently on understanding the holistic picture of how a family and individuals thrive in DC. I'm always so proud that DC offers the type of legal services that other cities just are not able to provide. And it's one of the things that makes me so proud of this community and so proud to be a part of the DC Bar Foundation. And so now I will turn it over to Chris Sakawe, who will moderate the distinguished panel. Thank you, Chris.
Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Lori.
And he's going to turn it over to Lori.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Lori Wakeman. Next to me is Emily Lagan. We are both members of the YLN-LC, which is what we say for short when we don't want to say the whole name. I think you've heard it enough. And we are co-chairs of this event, and so grateful that you all are here joining us today. So just to give you a little fundraising update, we are currently at $62,253, which is amazing. We're very proud. And you've also heard about this 5K challenge, which is what I'm going to call it, the up to $5,000 match from our two generous donors. Currently, we're at $2,753 towards that, so there's still some room to go. And you'll see on your tables, there's an opportunity text to give. So if you have it in your hearts and wallets and something in this panel really speaks to you, we would be very grateful if you text DCBF to 44321, and everything that comes in tonight up to $5,000 will be matched. So double donation.
I have a question.
Yes. What is that?
Do I just make it out to DC Bar or the Young Lawyers Network?
DC Bar Foundation. Yep. Thank you, Kelly.
Good work, Kelly.
And I am the last barrier between you and our panel, so I will keep it short and sweet, but I have the pleasure of introducing Chris Sakawe. Chris is a fellow member of the YLN-LC, and he is one of the co-chairs of the Entertainment Committee this year, and he will be moderating our fabulous panel. So Chris, the floor is yours.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? All right, perfect. Well, as I've been introduced, my name is Chris Sakawe. I'm a lawyer with Dykema Gossett downtown in DC. I'm also a member of the YLN-LC, and we are here today to talk about well-being. As Kelly had mentioned, well-being is basically a framework with which we can address systemic issues in the district through people and various organizations. But it's important to remember that it affects all of us. You know, each individual is hardwired to seek out the 5 pillars of well-being. Everyone wants social connectedness, everyone wants stability, everyone wants safety. Hey, George, come on in. You're right on time.
I was in a Hollywood movie. Well, it includes me parking right in front of this building. I hope we get to do that.
Oh, can you just pass this one in? We're doing this on the fly, but George, you just press the button for green, and then you speak into it.
Hey, this is George Jones.
Perfect. Right on time. As I was saying, every single person is hardwired to seek out these kind of individual tenets of well-being. I think the last one was access to resources. And so what that looks like in the civil legal aid context is, you know, a sense of connectedness between groups. How do we help to understand the whole person and provide resources and help for people in need? And so we're joined by 3 guests tonight. I'm joined by Allison Dowling, director with the Georgetown University Health Justice Alliance. Next to her is Daniel del Pielago, the housing director at Empower DC. And lastly, we have George Jones, CEO of Bread for the City. So before we start, why don't each of you just introduce yourselves and maybe give a couple sentences about what your organization does and the community that you serve. Allison, you want to start?
Excellent. Pardon me. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Allison Dowling, and I am a medical legal partnership director at the Health Justice Alliance, which is a medical legal partnership housed at Georgetown University Law Center. We have 3 medical legal partnerships, and I am happy to be here tonight representing our perinatal Legal Assistance and Wellbeing Project. The PLAW project, as we like to shorten it, launched back in 2021. So we're a relatively new project, and we're a small project. We are a team of a few people providing no-cost legal services to pregnant and postpartum patients at MedStar Washington Hospital Center's Women and Infant Services. So we provide those services at DC's largest safety net hospital. And our goal is to make sure that patients are able to access the care that they need and prioritize their health and their family's health and well-being. So we're really excited to be here tonight and talk a little bit more about what well-being means for us. We did incorporate it into the title of our project, and we really believe in it, and how well-being really lends itself to being incorporated into a medical legal partnership and the services that we're able to provide to our patients and our clients.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel del Pielago. I'm an organizer with Empower DC. I head up our housing work. Empower DC has been around for going on 20 years now officially as a nonprofit. We are a citywide organization that focuses on grassroots organizing. We work on different campaigns. As I mentioned, we have a housing campaign. We have a campaign around environmental justice. We do a lot of work at the Ivy City neighborhood that kind of brings a lot of our campaigns together. But the real focus of our work is to build power for low-income DC residents, Black residents, residents of color. We could work on a multitude of issues, but they all need to lead to building individual and collective power to create real change here in the district.
Good evening, everybody. I'm George Jones, CEO of Bread for the City. We provide food, clothing, medical, legal, and social services. We fight poverty sort of in two ways. Our downstream approach is providing food, clothing, medical, legal, and social services directly to people who are living in poverty, mostly Black and brown people. And then we try to go upstream to really sort of interrupt the systems that we think really perpetuate poverty. So we do a lot of advocacy, a lot of community organizing, partnering with groups like Empower DC. And tonight, we'll be talking a little bit about the eviction diversion program that we stood up really sort of in the midst of the pandemic and how that works. It was interesting because in reading, agreeing to speak on this, it forced me to actually read exactly what we're doing in that project. So hopefully I can get it right. We've got a lot of experts who are head our organization who actually do the work, but I'm here to talk about it, at least from the perspective I have as the CEO.
That's perfect. Thanks, guys. So obviously we're here tonight to talk about well-being, so let's just jump into it. As we heard from Kelly, the first main topic of well-being is social connectedness. So can each of you talk about, how your organizations incorporate connectedness between groups or how you try to foster connectedness in the community?
I can start, I guess. So, we are a membership-based organization. We have tons of people that call us all the time and say, I have this issue. And while we wish we could help those individuals with their individual issue, really our next question is like, well, who else in the building has these issues, right? Who else is facing similar problems so we can work together towards a common goal? So on that level, we really try to create organization, right? We try to bring people together. Also, through that work, it's connecting them with organizations such as Bread for the City to their legal support, with other, part of our work also, I'm here tonight, is to make relationships, to meet folks, to expand our network, so we can then connect people to those services. I'll just a brief example, we've been working in the Mayfair Mansions neighborhood in Northeast DC, where they've had, a management company that's been MIA. The owner was Freddie Mac just sued them for, foreclosure. They were, they weren't paying their mortgage, so it's now in receivership. And what we've been able to do is work with the Office of the Attorney General, who we've had a relationship with, and connect them with the residents. So the residents are now in connection and know that they have support, not only from our kind of grassroots rinky-dink kind of organization, but we're also partnered with a bigger, established city agency that does have some power right there, the Office of the Attorney General. So a lot of our work is in making those connections and having the people that are directly affected be the ones that are, leading the charge.
Excellent. And I'll add to how, from our perspective as a medical legal partnership, and how we are able to partner both internally. As I mentioned, we're housed at MedStar Washington Hospital Center, but this project that we work on is part of a larger MedStar initiative called Safe Babies, Safe Moms, which is aimed at addressing infant and maternal mortality and health outcomes. And that is a collaboration of a variety of different team members who are really all committed to working with patients and figuring out exactly what the patient's goals are and helping the patient achieve those goals. So we work with both internal partners at MedStar itself, as well as the external partners. I know there's plenty of you in the room from some of our community partners. Like I mentioned, we're a small team and we consider ourselves generalists, but there's plenty of areas that we don't practice in. So we are making warm handoffs, and we're always kind of constantly collaborating with outside agencies in order to really be able to provide that holistic care to our patients. So that would just be one example that we've worked with is we've worked with DC Legal Aid, as well as some of the government agencies, to look at some of the paperwork that new moms are expected to fill out just hours after giving birth. And the paperwork can have a really big impact on, what public benefits they might be receiving, on what the process for getting child support looks like, on what their child's future looks like, what benefits they may be able to access really can depend on what a mom is filling out in those critical hours after delivering. And so we've worked with those groups together to kind of figure out how can we better support the nurses who are kind of in the room helping these new moms, and how can we help the patients be able to know before they go into labor what they can expect or what they should be thinking about. And so that's kind of one example of us taking an upstream approach to try to avoid problems later on.
And at Breathless City, as I mentioned, we have these 5 core programs: food, clothing, medical, legal, and social services. And each of those programs is connected to a number of coalitions that we work with. And so, for instance, we are part of the DC Primary Care Association, as our medical practice is. We're part of the consortium, the legal consortium, as it relates to legal, and we're really partners with a coalition of clinics that are sort of doing the direct service work, legal aid, neighborhood legal services, legal service for the elderly, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another coalition that we work with daily, and particularly on some of the work we'll talk a little bit about tonight. But the same is true for our social services program. We're part of coalition, Association for Behavioral Health is one of the associations that we're connected to. And so this sort of idea of sort of coalition is how we have historically connected our work and partnered with folks who are doing similar work and tried to sort of create enough, impact on the ground to sort of make that direct service and downstream work for people or make a difference. We like to call it sort of alleviating the burden and the pain that poverty causes for people living in poverty. So that's work we've done, and we've done that work for almost, next year will be our 50th year. And then more and more we are going upstream and partnering with groups who are intentionally trying to be anti-racist and trying to deal with racial equity. And so we're part of coalitions that are focusing on that work. And again, in that work, we're really trying to get the city to commit to being anti-racist in every way, in all the policies it produces. As Empower DC would say, it really, a lot of that work starts with organizing real folks with lived experiences. So we've got an organizing department at BRED that really brings together folks who come to us for services, but really ultimately end up becoming leaders in our organization and leaders in the charge to try to sort of educate or otherwise convince power brokers and policymakers that change is necessary, that's possible, and that it should be done sort of centering their voices and their sort of real lived experiences in terms of how these changes might take place.
Great, thank you. And each of you kind of already touched on it, but we should also talk about stability and how the organizations that you each represent foster stability in the community, and also how you give a sense of stability to the people that you serve. So could you each, just maybe talk a little bit about the impact your organizations have on the stability of the people you serve?
Yeah, at Bread, again, I think we've always thought about the day-to-day services as being sort of a stabilizing factor for folks. And so, we help people more and more. We're trying to help people avoid eviction, but we certainly get involved pretty quickly when folks are at risk of eviction, which is a really typical challenge that people living with low incomes have. Our food program is designed to give people really a supplement to what they might have for food. And so we say it's a 5-day supply of food. It's, in some ways, it was originally designed to match what food stamps couldn't do. So it was the gap that food stamps sort of reportedly was supposed to last for 3.5 weeks. And so we're trying to sort of bridge the gap between what food stamps, because probably I would say 70% of people we see are at least eligible for food stamps. They may not all get it, but so that's sort of another way where we try to stabilize. In a lot of ways, I think I'll sum it up by saying that in a lot of ways, we're trying to sort of help people meet their ends meet. And with these services, in a lot of ways, what we provide is a kind of a proxy for real cash that many of us privileged folks use to sort of address legal issues or food security issues or health issues. And we've got a free clinic that people can come to and get access to healthcare and get support in getting the medication they need. And so, I think about those direct services as being our effort to sort of help people with sort of, sometimes we call it sort of just survive and sort of stabilize their lives, really.
Instability, unfortunately, is a major theme in many of the people, with many of the people we work with. It could be, facing an eviction, as George mentioned. It could be your property is going to be redeveloped. We work with a lot of public housing properties that are being redeveloped, where a resident will be told, you better get ready to move because we're going to knock this down, and you'll come back at some point. So people are always on the edge. People are always feeling like, what is happening? I don't know what's happening. Things are moving on me, and I have little control of what's happening. So part of our work is really to be a stabilizing force in their lives, right? As I mentioned, creating organizations, so creating these kind of tangible things that they can use to better maneuver in the many kind of rough waters that they find themselves in. So we help establish tenant associations. We help establish resident councils. We help establish, as I mentioned, relationships with other folks. And then, it was interesting. Several years ago, we did a survey with many of our leaders, and what do we do good? What do you all appreciate about Empower DC? And the biggest thing that we heard is, you guys stick around, right? Because in many of the, even people who want to do good, or organizations that want to do good, there's so much turnover, right? The politicians, they change every couple of years, right? The social workers, they change every couple of years. And our thing is, we're going to stick it out till the end, right? It's going to be a fight. It's going to be tough, but we're that person in the corner that you can turn to, or that organization in this case, that doesn't just swoop in and is there for the long run. And I think that's what people appreciate from our organization, is that we can help we can help give them a little more stability in a very unstable life.
And I'll just add that one of the components that we recognize is that for every single person, what stability looks like is going to be different. And so it's really important when we're working with our patients that we're listening, and that we are giving back feedback to make sure that we are prioritizing their needs and their wants, and not what we think should be the answer. So, for example, a patient might come in and present in a number of different ways that present as unstable. Maybe they have a notice taped to their door that their landlord is trying to evict them. Their SNAP benefits have been reduced. They have childcare issues. And oh, by the way, they also have a DV complaint going on as well. But what they're listening or what they're telling us that is the top priority is their employment. If I could only figure out my employment, I think these other things could be resolved, or at least we'd have some solution, and I'd have the mental stability and I'd be able to pay that rent. And so listening to that client, even though we know that there's 3 or 4 or 5 other legal problems, it's really important to listen to the client to know what stability looks like for them. And in that case, we might need to focus on the employment piece first and then work through those other issues that hopefully will get better as the employment gets better. So I think as a practitioner, remembering that our level of stability is not our client's level of stability. And what we define as a stable life isn't necessarily the same for our client, just like it's not the same for your friend or the same for your family member.
Thanks, Allison. And yeah, that is exactly good to remember that. Daniel, something you said, and George also touched upon this as well, but I think it'd be a good point to talk about the eviction diversion pilot program. The DC Bar Foundation helped to fund this pilot program to help basically try to divert evictions. It's all in the name. So Daniel, could you go into a little bit about the background of the program and your experience working with like a civil legal aid group as part of the program?
Sure. So when the oh God, what did they call it? When the mayor said basically COVID's over and all of the protections, and the council started pulling back all the protections that they had given to tenants and renters in the city, were starting to pull back. We realized that there was going to be a deluge of evictions, and there had been some volunteer work happening where people were going out trying to connect people to legal resources and to just resources in general. But it wasn't steady. It was like whenever we could get, maybe some students would come out, and we weren't heading that up. But this is what was happening in the background. Fortunately, we were able to get these funds to formalize this project a little bit more. So several nonprofits, like Bread for the City, are providing legal support. We provide on the ground support. So we go out and knock on the doors of folks and let them know, hey, you are slated for a court date or there's an eviction date, to let folks know, firstly, that that's happening. Because sometimes, even though you get a lot of stuff, oftentimes a survival mechanism for folks is like, I don't see it, I don't hear it, it's not going to happen. So part of it is to kind of nudge folks to let them know that that's happening. But then also that there is support out there, because oftentimes people feel really isolated, like, who's going to help me? I'm broke. They're about to kick me out. I don't have any help. So our job really is to go out there and make those connections and help folks realize that there is help. And what it really, to me, as somebody that's been doing this work for a while now, kind of on the ground, is we've really been able to establish stronger relationships with our peer organizations, such as Bread for the City, such as all the nonprofit legal service groups that you mentioned, where before, it was kind of like if a problem came up, we'd be like, hey, can you help us with that, or the individual. Now we are looking at ways to better work at fixing some of these systemic issues. The big realization of all of this is that the rent is too high in the city. So eviction, prevention is just kind of covering the result, the symptoms of the real problem. But nonetheless, I think it really is helping us, our side, to get better organized, to be more systemic about what's happening, and to help folks really realize that although you are faced with an eviction, it's a long process, and we're blessed in the district to have very strong legal protections for renters and for people facing an eviction. I'm hearing that the mediation that people have to go through, like they're being scheduled all the way through November. So although it is something we need to jump on and make sure that we're helping folks, we're trying to kind of slow down on that despair that can happen where folks are like, oh my God, I'm faced with an eviction, right? There is a process. You do have rights. So that's really what the work has focused on our.
Yeah, no, thank you. And George, I feel like you bring a slightly different perspective because whereas Daniel's group is a social services group that had to partner with a civil legal aid group, BRED does both, right? BRED is both a legal aid provider, it's a social service provider. So can you give us a perspective of how the eviction diversion pilot program went for BRED and if having so many different services available to them made it easier for BRED to provide those services?
Yeah, well, first, again, I want to sort of shout out to Empower DC and the other groups who either consider themselves canvassers or outreach workers. Yes, please. Because I can just imagine how helpful that was in the communities and the neighborhoods they went in to have people. I mean, some people may have been spooked a little bit by people showing up at the doors telling them about this stuff, but at the end of the day, what we saw was people sort of getting active, mobilizing themselves and working with both agencies like Bread for City, Power DC, to sort of figure out some solutions. And yeah, one of the things that Bread that's always been kind of a strength of ours is this whole array of services we have can oftentimes sort of end up with folks getting more value by connecting with us than just whatever the core issue or the primary issue is. So although in this case, eviction is maybe the presenting challenge, if you will, when folks hear, it's rare that I always say this to people who fund us, it's rare that somebody comes into our organization and says, oh, I'm hungry, but everything else is fine. Or I'm about to be evicted, but everything else is fine. Or, hey, I don't have access. The truth of the matter is all of these things oftentimes exist at the same time. And so having an organization like BRED where people can, yes, access lawyers, and we set up the eviction diversion program, set up a hotline. And so we were one of 6 legal services groups that were answering calls about evictions, but both in our sort of answering the calls about evictions, we can explore and investigate whether or not there are other things going on, and typically there were, or they can sort of come to Bread for the City and learn about those things too. And so that is how we were kind of expanding sort of access to wellness, if you will, or a chance for people to deal with wellness in a holistic way anyway. Again, always been our model. This was sort of a new way, a kind of a more portable version of it, for us sort of doing, going out sort of as canvassers and as outreach workers. And we think, by the way, that this model is probably going to persist. We're going to continue because we did see it as being really important. There's still people who want to go directly to the courts, even though the courts aren't still quite open yet. But I'm sure that'll be a reality that some folks just prefer to go down there. But we think there'll be a number of folks, a large percentage of people who continue to want this kind of access that is kind of virtual, kind of remote, if you will. The other thing I wanted to say is kind of a tangent a little bit, but back to this question about sort of what's sort of happening to people. I'm going increasingly more cynical about employment as a solution to the problem. I think the problem in the district is income inequality and wealth inequality. And I think the fix is going to have to be much more direct than employment. It's going to have to be cash directly to households. We need to use cash. This is a rich city, it's a rich country. We can afford wars and all kinds of things. We need to, and here's the thing here's the soapbox appeal I try to give to government and philanthropic leaders is it's in our own interest. Like study after study shows that when people have enough money, they just do better. Their kids do better. Their health indices are better. They're more likely to be employed. They live longer. And by the way, we all know that because most of us in here probably are privileged people for whom money is doing that in our lives. And so this idea of and work as a solution, one has been tried a long time, and so work is a noble thing. Probably most of the people, I love my job, so I'm not trying to knock work, but I don't think it is the solution to what's challenging folks. And it isn't direct enough, it's not quick enough, if we get enough money in these households where people aren't living in extreme poverty, I believe that folks will get out of poverty. We can break the cycle. An old concept of breaking the cycle, it's going to mean investing real dollars directly to community members who are living on low incomes. Because when the wealth gap is 81 times it is for between blacks and whites, and the income gap is 3 times between blacks and whites, it's just a job is probably not going to do that. And getting the job anyway is also a dubious sort of concept, sort of thing to hang our hat on. Again, anybody who wants to work, we should try to help them get work. But if we want to solve poverty, we're going to have to deal with income inequality and wealth inequality. And so you'll hear me on the stump talking about this anywhere you go. So.
Let me just add, I think it's important to push back against that narrative, because relevant to this discussion is when the mayor introduced her budget, she cut emergency rental assistance program. And at the breakfast where she presents her budget, what did she say? What was her response to the ERAP being cut? And she said, well, unemployment is down. People should just go out and get a job.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Before we move on, can either of you speak to some of the successes that the eviction diversion pilot program yielded, or any firsthand results that you both saw?
A very personal one is that oftentimes we will knock on doors, and as George mentioned, sometimes people are like, "Who the hell are you?" Like, what do you want? Or they may not answer the door. So we leave flyers. And somebody called and was like, "Hey, I got your flyer. I need help." She listed off a bunch of things that were kind of weighing her down. Luckily, we were able to connect her to LT Land, which is the landlord tenant assistance network, at least legal assistance, I always forget. And we were able to connect her to that. And she said, hey, we just got right under the gun. We were able to get some representation. They pushed back the court date. So it's given us more time to work out a defense. And we're not going to get evicted right away. So that was, I think, a really positive outcome on a more personal level. For us organizationally, I think, we, as I mentioned before, is we are in better relationships with other organizations. We've been able to kind of, we're working differently than before. So I think that's another real positive outcome of all of this, is that there are systems being put in place that hopefully will last.
And I'll just echo this idea that for a lot of people, they got access to these other services that Bread can offer to people, and Bread sort of has the ability to also make sure people get access to services that we don't provide, because we provide sort of advice and referral about what else to access. And so we saw a lot of that happen. That people, and again, some of the eviction stuff is even still playing itself out. So to some degree, those successes are yet to even be realized. But I think the connection with Bread and the other services we provide, people now finding that they can get a primary care doc, those kind of things we're seeing in kind of real time. So that's been a big part of the successes that and we're still trying to get the numbers. I mean, it's been difficult during the pandemic to track numbers as well as we did before that. So still trying to have the numbers ready. But I think we'll be analyzing sort of really statistically what kind of impact we've had over the coming months.
No, that's great. Thank you, guys. Now I want to move on to another of the core tenets of well-being, which is safety, which I think Allison had kind of touched on, but they all kind of intermesh, as you start experiencing problems with stability, you might also experience problems with safety. You might also experience having trouble accessing resources. So would you mind speaking at all to, whether you've seen safety as a driving factor or impact on the services your organization can provide?
Working with young families, safety is a huge concern for our clients, whether it's personal safety, safety in their home, safety at, their employment, safety just living in the district. I think we all have safety on our mind. And I think that's exceptionally true for our patients that we're working with. So it's definitely a factor that plays into a person's well-being. And the nice thing about being in a medical legal partnership is that we do have so many different partners, be it from social services to medical teams to mental health providers to a legal team that's really able to attack or think about safety from every single angle. Of course, as a lawyer, I sit here and think, okay, what does the DC code allow me to do? How can I help this person? But sometimes that's not realistic. What we have in the law books is great, and it can be a starting point, but the patient's like, that's not going to help me tonight. And so then the question is, okay, well, let's bring in the social worker and see how we can come up with a game plan that helps you in this immediate moment. Or maybe it's working with the nurse case navigator to alleviate some of these maybe unfounded fears or fears about the pregnancy in general that can be quickly alleviated with a medical opinion. So I think the idea of safety is important to remember and to think about what different approaches. And I don't think there's any single person or specialty that can ensure safety. It's really a number of different areas that we have to tap into. And so the collaboration there is really important when you think about a person's well-being from the safety perspective.
I've got a couple of thoughts. One, some of you may have read Breath for the City. We recently sued the local government because because we do that a lot for better for us. But the issue here was that we believe that the district, by sending police to situations that were really behavioral health and mental health issues, was literally sort of a violation of the rights and the protections of the people who were experiencing these mental health crises. Plus, it puts police in these bad situations where they're not competent enough, most of us aren't, to deal with someone who's got major mental illness in the throes of some kind of crisis, mental health crisis. And so we sued the government to say they've got to come up with the right redress, the right supports to send to these calls rather than police. And so that's the kind of safety that we've been focusing on recently, which is the safety of people who are in theory supposed to be helped by the police, because that is a real problem nationally and certainly in the district that the police just aren't equipped to do that. So that's sort of one slice of how we sort of tackle safety. The other thing that is also on my mind and I think needs to be said and needs to be sort of dealt with, and I've said this in a couple of community spaces, which is, I understand in Southeast where I just came from, it's why it took me so long to get here. It's a long commute from Southeast DC here in rush hour. But there's a lot of violent crime happening. But there's a part, and this is controversial to say in some degrees, but there's a part of me that feels like, we're victims of media. When it bleeds, it leads. Like every time you turn on the TV, every story is about somebody getting shot, and that's a real thing. I really sort of don't like having to say this because people are losing their loved ones, they're losing children. It's a horrific thing. But one morning I woke up and there was no crime in DC. And so a story from Richmond had to be piped into my house just so I can see. I'm like, did I really need to know that somebody got shot in Richmond? I'm not sure that helped me in any way sort of cope my life. But here's the problem. There's several problems. Like, still the portrayals too often portray Black people as being like the face of crime is Black people. And I tell some of my white friends, if I wasn't Black, I might be afraid of Black people, because to hear the story, everybody who's really committing crime is a Black person. I don't think that's true. But even if you worry about crime being sort of disproportionately present in Black communities, take the Southeast where I just came from. There's probably 20 to 30,000 young people there, and maybe there's been 100 shootings, really horrific. But the question is, how come this story it's not worth telling the story about the 29,990 who haven't committed a crime? Like, that doesn't seem to be a story worth telling. Most of these kids are just trying to survive in this horrific situation. And so it's going to take courage. And I've said this to policymakers. I know that it's expedient to say we're going to do more police and we got to have police in here, but police at best are reactionary. Crimes are usually already taking place when they get there. And at worst, they're spending money that we could use to do what I talked about earlier, which is getting money into these households so that people have better housing, that they're not living in abject poverty. And again, study after study shows that folks just do better. Poor people, Black people, they know what to do with money. They're gonna take care of their children. They're gonna get food in the house. They're gonna do the right things if we support them in this way. So I just think that in terms of safety, one of the challenges is an organizing challenge, which is to make the case that we need courageous leaders in this city that will say, even to the community members who are asking for police, that's probably fundamentally not the solution. I've heard police, last thing I'll say about this, we had some shootings in Southeast near our building not long ago. And I told a police officer, and he said to me, we were near the shooting, we just couldn't find out where they were. I mean, even police understand that they're not the answer to the challenges that folks face in these communities. And I think we need to just come to grips with that.
So just briefly, I think, we approach oftentimes what limits people's self-advocacy and just a sense of autonomy is they're afraid to speak out because there are very real retributions that the housing authority that will do. A slum landlord will, threaten to kick you out. So what we try to do is to help people realize that if you are part of an organization that we have your back, right? And actually speaking out about it helps, because if you are hidden, if you keep it hidden and kind of under covers, they have that power over you. But the more that we can, put some power behind these stories and get it out in the press and get it out in front of decision makers, the better protected people are, because they're not going to go after somebody that's been in the news. They're not going to try to, evict you if you've had a whole Washington Post kind of spread done on your issues, on your property. So that's one way that we approach safety.
Yeah, no, that's well said. Thank you, Daniel. And that kind of leads into my next question, which is about next steps. We've talked about well-being and how some of these problems can domino into other problems and multiple crises. What are the next steps? How do your organizations view what's next for how you're going to serve your communities better, change your organization? What are your opinions on that?
One of the things that we find important, we're housed at Georgetown University Law Center. We are a medical legal partnership with both Georgetown Law Center as well as Georgetown Medical School. And we really believe one approach, and it's not the final answer, but one piece of this puzzle is to make sure that the future leaders, the future lawyers, the future doctors, the future social workers, recognize and respect a person's well-being and take the lessons, the pillars of well-being into their approach. And so we are modeling a program where we are working with students to build capacity to provide holistic care, to listen to their patients or to listen to their clients, and to take an anti-racist approach and hopefully break down some of the systemic and racist barriers that exist in our society. So again, that's a long-term commitment to trying to solve this problem. But in the immediacy, I think financial support is crucial. And I think, looking at this bigger systemic problems is really the only approach. Providing legal services is essential and necessary for the individuals that we serve, but in many ways it's putting Band-Aids on large wounds and trying to figure out that way to remedy this so it doesn't keep occurring is the real challenge.
I joked a little earlier, we're like this rinky-dink kind of organization, and we're this kind of ragtag group. We used to be a church basement organization. We work at St. Augustine in Northwest DC. We are now on the third floor. But our organization is growing. And as I mentioned, we are about to be 20 years as an official nonprofit. So, for us, we are really trying to figure out that next step, right? How do we build on this power, on this kind of niche that we've created within the organizing activism space in the district, and really build on the relationships that we have, right? So people know when we walk in the room, when we walk into a DCHA development meeting, they're gonna like, oh Jesus, here they come. They're gonna ask a bunch of questions, and the more that we can do that, the more that we can amplify that, because we are headed for quite a bit of change within the public housing space, the environmental justice space. There's a lot happening, so we just want to be able to build our organization, bring more people into the organization, strengthen the relationships we have with people who are directly affected, to build and grow over the next 20 years. So we really hope to grow our people power, or keep growing our people power.
Well, I'm going to echo some of what's been said, which is we think what the big next is systems reform, dealing with racism, trying to drive anti-racism across the city. And so we're going to be investing a lot of our time in that, a lot of our sort of power, if you will, that we have as a large, we're actually a fairly large nonprofit. We've got 150 employees, a $23 million budget. So we're a big entity. We're still, by the way, just a Band-Aid. So this downstream thing is a Band-Aid. People metaphorically are bleeding when it comes to access to these things, but it is not the solution. We're just not going to program our way out of poverty. And we know that we need to be there. We're unapologetic about being there for folks, because when they show up hungry and they show up in need of housing support, or they show up needing to see a provider, we want to be there for them. But really, we have to go upstream and make our presence sort of unnecessary. And that's going to require organized community members. We're not big enough to do it by ourselves. So partnering with Empower DC and other groups who are trying to push for that. The other thing I'll say that's even more controversial, I have to say it because I spend so much of my time lately doing this, is we've got serious challenges inside of Bread for the City. One of them in the legal spaces, we've been trying to figure out how to not only keep and hire attorneys of color in our organization. We have 20 or so when we're fully staffed, but we've had real trouble keeping them. And a couple of things happening is, one of the things one of the sobering realities that we're hearing is that our own institution is kind of oppressive. I mean, virtually any institution you're going to be in America will have challenges that are associated with sort of a white supremacy kind of model. I mean, that's just the way corporations, even nonprofits, are developed, and we're trying to undo that piece. It makes it tough for attorneys of color to come and work for us, because the environment's not always as welcoming as we want it to be. And so we're working on that. But the other piece of it is we also don't pay competitively enough. And it's especially difficult for people of color to take jobs. Oftentimes, as one of my employees like to say, for Black and brown people, our money is not our own. Like, our whole family is living off of whoever the highest paid person in the family is. And so it's really, so we're, for instance, in DC, you might make, as a starting salary, $72,000 a year at Bread for the City, and the district would pay that same new attorney $90,000 for as an attorney, and the federal government is paying $110,000. So literally in our own backyard, we're competing against a market that is making us have to confront the fact that we've got to figure out how to pay these attorneys who are doing all this good work more money. So that's the other piece that's our future is trying to do both the systems work and the reform work internally and externally.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I'm told that is all the time we have. I could listen to you guys for another hour, 2 hours, but unfortunately, I think we're just wrapping up here. How about a big hand for all the panelists? All right, and now I'm turning it over to Josette Barsano.
Thank you, Chris. Can we give another round of applause for that incredible panel? Does anyone else get the urge to say, may I please the court, when they come up to a podium? Thank you for laughing at that. Well, for those I have not had the pleasure of meeting tonight, my name is Josette Barsano. I work at the DC Affordable Law Firm as a managing attorney, and I'm a member of the YLN and one of the subcommittee co-chairs. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Tonight, I hope you will agree that we've witnessed the power of collaboration and the impact that can have on building pathways to justice for our fellow district residents. Through the incredible work, and truly I'm amazed at this incredible work of our panelists and the organizations they represent, we've seen tangible examples of how all of your generous donations and sponsorships have improved the well-being of so many DC residents in promoting meaningful access to relevant resources.
So George, Allison, Daniel, thank you again for joining us tonight. It's been a real privilege. Your insights, expertise, and dedication is truly inspiring to us all. And to go more about the funds, I know a lot of people have given tonight. Does anyone know what the funds go toward when you give tonight, specifically? So it's pretty special. The funds that we raised tonight provide critical unrestricted dollars to DC legal aid organizations and the loan repayment support for DC's public interest attorneys that I'm very happy that George gave a little shout out about. So thank you all for donating tonight. I'm thrilled to share that we have in total raised, including the match, $68,865. And for those who have an affiliation with numbers, that's 15% more than our 60,000 goal this year and 5% even more than last year. So thank you for helping us meet that. And I would not be a product of the DC Affordable Law Firm Training Program if I did not want to spread some more love. So I want to extend another special thanks to our generous host, Hunton, for their allowing us this use of this incredibly beautiful space. And I also want to acknowledge the YLN for their tremendous efforts in organizing the event. Allison and Ashley, I don't know where you're sitting, our YLN co-chairs, Emily, Lori, our event co-chairs, and Chris, Myra, and Tyler, my fellow subcommittee co-chairs. Your dedication, hard work, and passion have made this evening possible. Thank you. And I want to give a special shout out to the Bar Foundation board members, Danielle Reyes and Kelly Darnell, for their attendance and their outstanding remarks tonight. And this is one piece of Spread the Love that has not really been given tonight, so I have the privilege of sharing it. I want to express our gratitude to Daryl, Greer, Mashonda, Kira, and the rest of the DC Bar Foundation team for your unwavering support in promoting this event, as well as for your visionary leadership and tireless efforts in shaping the future of legal services in DC. Your work truly continues to make a lasting impact on this community. Thank you. So go ahead.
No, sorry.
So in closing, I want to thank each and every one of you for your presence and engagement tonight. Let's carry the spirit of tonight's discussion forward. Let's foster the partnerships that our wonderful panelists spoke about, and let's encourage those innovative approaches to civil legal aid. Together, we can create more avenues to justice. Thank you. And you may go forth.